I still clearly remember that day when I first met the famous shaman of the Hmong village. His name was Lycon. The people in the area still tell each other about him as a living legend, someone who has the ability to save people who seem to have died at the hands of the god of death. My village is located between towering mountains, covered in clouds all year round, with cold air and streams flowing through crevices of rocks. Life here is simple and hard, but spirituality is something deeply attached to the Hmong people. Whenever someone is seriously ill, no one dares to ignore the shaman's call for help. Li Khan is not just an ordinary healer. He wears traditional brocade costumes, a tight headscarf, and always holds a set of mo drums with red threads and meticulously hand-embroidered charms. Each of his steps seems to lead the sounds of the mountains and forests into the sound of drums and gongs echoing in the quiet space. I still remember that time Mrs. Helene in the village was seriously ill. Her body was curled up like a soulless corpse. Her eyes were half closed, breathing with difficulty. The villagers said that death was near. No one dared to hope that she would survive. But Mr. Lai Khan came, not a bit afraid. He sat next to her, started the ceremony with prayers in the Hmong language that I had never heard before. The drum beat steadily, the gong sounded clearly. The talismans were drawn on the ground with white chalk by him. I stood outside the door, looked in, and felt a mysterious aura surrounding the house. The space seemed to freeze. Only the sound of the drum and his prayers echoed in my mind. After many hours, Mrs. Helene opened her eyes. Those eyes seemed to find light again. Her body was softer, no longer curled up. Everyone in the village was happy, considering it a miracle. That was also the first time I believed in the shaman's mystical power. Since then, many sick and ill people were saved by him. Even those who seemed to be in the hands of the god of death were called back from the dead by him. The people loved and trusted him as a guardian angel, a benevolent father in the middle of the wild mountains. But not everyone was happy with those miracles. In the deep darkness of the other world, the god of death was not satisfied when its prey was taken away. Even other types of demons could not give up. They came to the shaman many times, bringing darkness and death, challenging and threatening the peace of the village. But Mr. Lai Khan, with his deep faith and demon-killing skills, still stood firm, constantly fighting the darkness to protect the lives of the people. I still remember that night clearly. A cold, rainy night in the forest. Thunder and lightning rumbled, making the treetops in the forest shake as if they were about to be uprooted. The flickering light of the lightning shone into the small house of the shaman Li Khan, highlighting the rough lines of the old, worn wooden wall. That house was like a small fortress in the middle of the wild mountains, where he took refuge in the mysterious and dark sea and sky. I used to think that only the light of the sun could dispel the darkness, but here, in the quietest hours of the night, I understood that the darkness was deeper, darker than anything I had ever known. It crept into every corner, every breath of wind, and even into the souls of the living. Mr. Lai Khan sat at an old wooden table, preparing offerings for an important ceremony. His eyes lit up in the flickering candlelight. His skillful fingers arranged each medicinal leaf, each scarlet paper talisman meticulously embroidered with ancient characters that only he understood. Next to him was a set of bamboo drums, a sacred instrument indispensable in every ritual. I stood by the window looking at him in the dim light, feeling both respect and horror. No one understood his power and secrets, only knowing that he was the only person in the village who could communicate with the underworld, could stop the god of death and repel ghosts. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the crack of the door, carrying a whisper that sounded like the voice of the underworld, a soft hiss, like invisible curses. The window shook slightly, the candle swayed and flickered as if about to go out. I felt a cold air run down my spine, as if an invisible power was surrounding the room. The shaman closed his eyes, His deep voice began to resonate, repeating ancient mantras in a Hmong language that I had never heard anyone else speak. I felt the tension spread through the space, as if everything stood still. Only the chanting echoed, intertwined with the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the door. I shivered as a shadowy darkness appeared before him, layer by layer, covering the space like a giant black curtain. The darkness gradually took shape, dimly like a giant monster with red eyes shining like fire, a gaze full of hatred and menace. Mr. Lai Can was not afraid. He stood up, his hands still not leaving the MO drum. The drum beat began to beat, each beat regular, urgent as if urging a battle. The shadow slowly entered the room, emitting dry, creepy sounds. "I am the god of death," the voice seemed to echo from the depths, cold and full of authority. "You took my soul, saving those who should have been in my hands. I will not let you off, Li Gan." The shaman replied with a sigh, then his voice lowered with determination. "I do not take the souls of the god of death. I only return those who are not yours. I am the one who keeps the balance, protects life, and fights against unjust death. Then you will pay dearly." The eerie darkness roared, emitting a terrifying cold air, causing the room to freeze. Curses began to pour out. Mournful screeches and screams echoed from outside, as if the entire forest was crying out in pain. From deep within the darkness, other ghosts and demons also began to appear, like the minions of the god of death sent to punish him. They came in all sorts of terrifying forms, from tiny wailing ghosts to giant black demons with sharp claws and eyes glowing like hellfire. Mr. Lai Can was not shaken. He beat the MO drums repeatedly, his chanting voice getting louder and louder, creating a mystical barrier between him and the darkness. The amulets on his body glowed, forming a magical circle surrounding the house. The sound of the Mo drums mixed with the chanting like an ancient song, awakening the hidden spiritual power within him. I stood there in fear, knowing that this battle was not only between humans and demons, but also between life and death, between light and darkness. At that moment, a strong wind blew through, blowing out the candles, plunging the room into thick darkness. But the light from the amulets and the Mo drums was still bright like a torch lighting the way. Mr. Lai Can continued to chant, each word like a sharp arrow shooting straight into the darkness, chasing away each terrifying ghost. Finally, when the dawn broke, the darkness gradually dissipated like smoke. The sound of the wind also calmed down. The room returned to silence as if no battle had ever happened. But I knew that this was only the opening battle, and the darkness would return even stronger. The shaman looked at me with deep eyes, his voice still filled with sadness. "This war is not over. Death does not easily ignore those who stand in its way. We must always be ready, not only to save people, but also to maintain the balance between the two worlds." I felt my heart moved by his resilience and noble mission, but I could not help but fear the dangers lurking ahead. Under the vast sky and mountains, I realized that the shaman's small light was the last ray of hope in the midst of the dark night, and the ghosts that were gradually rising. After that creepy night, the atmosphere in the village seemed to change completely. Every time the sun set, a cold wind began to creep through each house, carrying the gloomy breath of ghosts that had not yet been released. People no longer dared to go out after the sun set. They locked their doors, closed their bolts carefully, and prayed for peace. I walked around the village on such an evening, under the pale moonlight illuminating the old thatched roofs. The children were shivering, huddled in the corners of the houses, their eyes fixed on the darkness outside, as if afraid that any sound might bring about something strange. I stopped in front of the shaman Lai Can's house. The light from inside the house was weak, but enough for me to see that he was preparing for an important ceremony. On the wooden table, dozens of red paper charms, medicinal leaves, and offerings were carefully arranged. In particular, the old but still clean set of shaman drums was placed in the center. He looked at me, his eyes still calm but showing a look of fatigue. "Tonight will be an unusual night, my child. Darkness covers not only the outside, but also the inside of people's hearts. Restless spirits are stirring, and the dark ones are starting to rise." I asked, "Do you know where they will come from?" He replied, his voice serious. "The god of death is angry. He has sent his minions to threaten and punish. They can come in many forms no one knows in advance. Only preparation and spells can help us fight back." As the night fell, I followed him to the old forest, where the tall ancient trees cast a dark shadow, each of his footsteps imprinted on the ground like an oath to protect the villagers. The wind whistled through the leaves, creating a moaning sound like the cries of souls trapped between two worlds. He began the ritual, drawing magic circles on the ground, using incense ash to light them, chanting magic words in the Hmong folk song. The sound of the Mo drum echoed through the mountains and forests, breaking the silence and calling back the ancient spiritual power. Not long after, the darkness began to change. Strange shapes gradually appeared. Demons with red eyes, sharp claws like daggers, large and skinny bodies stepped out from the darkness. There were ghosts of children, crying miserably, carrying the pain of souls that had not yet been liberated. Those creatures wrapped around the tree roots, clinging like haunting ghosts that would not let go. I felt my heart pounding, my breathing quickening. The shaman stood in the middle of the circle, the shaman drum still beating continuously, blending with the powerful chanting of spells. Each beat of the drum was like an arrow of light piercing the darkness, forcing the demons to retreat. The battle between light and darkness began. The demons stretched out their sharp claws, rushing into the spell circle with ferocity and madness. But they could not overcome the sacred barrier that Mr. Lycan created. They roared, tearing the air with gloomy screams, like the sound of hell rising. I stood outside the circle, watching and fearing. Under the moonlight, the demons were clearly visible in every horrifying detail. Their skin was blackened, covered with torn scars. Their eyes were red like burning fire, and sometimes they emitted sounds like the strange laughter of a madman. The shaman did not allow himself to tire. His hands continuously beat the drums. His voice still resounded strongly, not giving the darkness a chance to overwhelm him. It seemed that it was the strength from tradition, from faith and will, that helped him stand firm in this storm. In the midst of the fierce battle, a childish ghost appeared closest to me. It looked at me with sad eyes, crying miserably. I felt my heart ache, understanding the pain and despair of that soul. But even if I wanted to help, I could not get through the spell to touch it. Mr. Lai Khan shouted a powerful spell. The drum beats became more urgent. The light from the red paper charms burned fiercely. The demons were chased away. Some of them screamed in pain and then gradually disappeared into the air, leaving the village in temporary peace. When the ghostly storm subsided, I returned to the small house with the shaman. On the way, I heard the villagers whispering prayers, their eyes looking up at the starry night sky with faith and hope. He looked at me, his eyes full of depth. The battle with darkness is not only a confrontation between spells and demons, but also a battle within the human heart. Only when people understand the power of faith and courage can they fight against the growing darkness. I understood that the journey ahead would be full of dangers, but my heart also felt warmed by the shaman's determination and love for the village. I vowed to join him, no matter how difficult it was, not to give up, to protect life and maintain peace for everyone. After that dark and spooky night, I thought that everything would calm down, but no, that was just the beginning of even more terrifying challenges. In the following days, strange phenomena began to appear in the village, making the people even more frightened. During the day, everything seemed normal, but when the sun set behind the mountains, a layer of darkness seemed to cover the village. The wind whistled, The leaves rustled like mysterious whispers, and the air grew heavier. People began to see shadowy figures appearing in dark corners. Strange sounds rang out in the night, making no one dare to step outside alone. The shaman Lycan explained that the god of death had not given up, and this time he had sent more dangerous minions, fierce ghosts that could possess humans to sow disaster and destruction from within. One night, while I was helping him prepare offerings for the village protection ritual, I suddenly heard a loud knock on the door. Opening the door, I saw Mrs. Mai, the frail old woman in the village, with a pale face, her hands trembling as she pointed toward the dark forest. There is someone standing there, but it is not a person." We hurriedly followed Mrs. May out. Just as she said, a dark figure appeared in the darkness of the old forest, its face unclear, but its eyes flashed a cold red light. The ghost let out a gasping breath and eerie sounds that made my heart stop. Mr. Lai Ken immediately took out a set of drums, the sound of which resounded loudly, breaking the darkness of the night while he chanted ancient incantations. The ghost suddenly transformed, becoming a hideous creature with sharp teeth and long claws that curled down, rushing straight into the spell circle. The fierce battle took place again. But this time, the evil spirit was not simply chased away like before. It had the ability to wriggle, change shape, and even invade the minds of the living, spreading terrifying obsessions. I witnessed many people in the village starting to lose control, tearing each other apart, or falling into a state of incomprehensible confusion. The shaman explained that this ghost was a soul-stealing ghost, a type of demon that specializes in invading and controlling the souls of the living, turning them into unconscious puppets. To cope, he had to intensify the rituals, using more spells and techniques of blowing smoke from special herbs to cleanse and protect the soul. I went with him to each house to help people perform the ceremony, although it was dangerous. I could not sit still when my loved ones were being threatened. The feeling of fear crept into every step, every tree shadow, every small noise made me jump. But seeing the shaman steadfastly resisting the darkness, I felt like I was given more strength. One night, when we were performing the ceremony by the stream next to the village, a howl echoed throughout the mountains and forests. It was the howl of a monster that did not belong to this world, bringing coldness to the bone marrow. The shaman immediately said that it was Hon Lang, a ferocious wolf spirit, a henchman of the god of death, who specializes in lurking to capture the souls of the weak. A new war began, but this time it was not just about beliefs and spells. It is also a battle between the will to live and die, between light and darkness within each person. I looked at the shaman, the only one standing firm in the midst of the ghostly storm. His eyes were bright with faith and determination, like the last light of a world under threat. And I knew that no matter how dark the road ahead was, he and the villagers would never give up. In the following days, the atmosphere in the village became heavier and heavier. Every night was a life and death battle between light and darkness, between life and death. The people could no longer sleep peacefully. They lived in fear and despair, but still believed in the strength and courage of the shaman Lycan. I clearly saw the traces of fatigue imprinted on his face. His bright eyes had become tired, but he still did not give up. He spent all his time preparing charms, practicing spells, and studying ancient scriptures, looking for ways to increase his strength. One rainy night, when everyone was taking shelter in their house, there was suddenly a violent knock on the door. I opened the door and saw a young man, his face covered in blood and wounds, trembling as he walked in. He told me that the group of forest workers had been attacked by a demon while working near the edge of the deep forest. Many people had gone missing or were seriously injured. The shaman immediately decided to organize a group to check and help. I was invited to go with him, full of anxiety but also determined. On the way to the scene, the air was cold. The wind howled through the leaves like the moans of ghosts. When we arrived, the scene was horrifying. Footprints were deeply imprinted on the ground, pieces of torn clothes, blood was everywhere. The painful screams of the injured echoed in the forest, mixed with strange, inexplicable sounds. The shaman began to perform a ceremony right in the middle of that horrifying place, chanting spells, drawing talismans, and burning incense to drive away the ghosts. But this time, the darkness was not easily subdued. The evil spirits appeared in a more terrifying, sharper form, rushing in like a pack of ferocious wolves, wanting to crush everything. A fierce battle took place. The shaman and his group fought using ancient methods, combining spiritual power and wisdom. Every time the shaman beat his drum, mysterious rays of light burst out, destroying the evil spirits. But in return, he was also injured quite a bit. I witnessed those dangerous moments with extreme tension. The screams and the relentless battles made me realize that the power of darkness was not only mysterious, but also very real and cruel. After a long night of fighting, we finally pushed back the demons, saving a few survivors. But the price was very high. Some people lost their lives, including those close to me. The shaman was exhausted, but still whispered to me, "This war is not over. It has only just begun. Death still has many minions. Many ghosts have not been banished. We must prepare ourselves because the darkness will never let us go." On that rainy night, when I looked into his eyes, I understood that it was not only a war between humans and demons, but also a war to save the soul, to save the life of this small village. I told myself that I would not give up, no matter how terrible the darkness was. When dawn broke, the village still smelled of incense smoke and blood from the night of fighting. The shaman Khan and I returned in a heavy silence, as if the whole space was immersed in the haunting experience we had just experienced. The landscape seemed to be no longer intact. The trees were bare, the ground was covered with footprints and blood. The small houses appeared and disappeared in the mist, evoking an unforgettable feeling of coldness. The shaman walked slowly, his deep eyes looking into the distance, at the highest mountain of the village, as if searching for something beyond reach. I followed, my heart filled with anxiety and unanswered questions. "How are you feeling?" I asked softly. He stopped, looking at me with eyes that seemed to contain a dark sky. "The god of death does not give up easily. He is gathering stronger dark forces. And this time, the ghosts are not only wandering in the village, but also preparing to attack the souls of each of us." I felt a chill down my spine when I heard those words. It was no longer just wandering ghosts, but a bloody, endless war where life and death intertwined in every breath. That very evening, a group of villagers came to find the shaman with panicked faces. They reported that many people in the village had begun to show strange symptoms. Persistent insomnia, ghosts appearing in dreams, the feeling of being watched even when they were alone in the house. Some even said they heard voices coming from the mirror. Mr. Khan pondered, then decided to organize a collective exorcism ceremony right in the village's cultural house. I was assigned to help him prepare everything: charms, drums, sacrificial leaves, and necessary items. The air in the cultural house was thick with the scent of incense, and it felt like an invisible energy was wrapping around everyone. Everyone sat together in solemn silence, their eyes focused on the shaman as he began to recite ancient incantations in a mixture of Hmong and Vietnamese, his voice echoing through the old wooden walls. Suddenly, in that quiet space, small lights flickered like ghostly fireflies around everyone's heads. The wind blew outside the window, the drums rumbled, and a cold air suddenly rushed in, making my heart beat faster. A few people in the crowd suddenly twitched, their eyes widening in horror. The shaman stopped, looked intently, then continued to emphasize each incantation, his hands drawing mystical symbols in the air, the cold wind getting stronger and stronger. "This is a magic formation," he explained to me after the ceremony. a siller spell hidden deep in ancient scriptures, which can temporarily seal the souls of invading ghosts. But to maintain it, we need the consensus of the entire village to maintain faith and solidarity. Under the flickering light of the oil lamps, people looked at each other with eyes mixed with worry and hope. I saw some people starting to shed tears. The elderly and children all felt the severity of what was coming. In the following days, the shaman spent most of his time organizing exorcism ceremonies, while also treating those affected by ghosts. I followed along step by step, gradually understanding more about the power and limitations of these ancient rituals. But the more I understood, the more fear I felt in my heart. One night, while inspecting the affected houses, I came across a scene that I would never forget. A young girl, pale-faced, sat huddled in a corner, muttering incantations in a language no one understood. Her eyes flashed with an unearthly light, and she would lose control at times, then fall into a state of unconsciousness. The shaman told me it was a case of demon possession, one of the most dangerous forms. He explained that when a ghost takes over a person's body, it uses their life energy to continue spreading darkness. He began performing a complex exorcism ritual, while I and the others maintained a protective circle of charms and drums. The air was stifling. The chanting mixed with the howling wind and strange sounds made me feel as if the world was being torn apart. After a long while, the girl woke up, her face drenched in sweat, but the ghost was no longer in her eyes. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I also felt tired, almost exhausted from the tension. The shaman looked at me with a serious look. This battle is not just about exorcising demons, but also about preserving each person's soul. Every time we exorcise demons, we also take away a part of our own strength. If we are not careful, we will also be drawn into the darkness. I clearly felt the heavy responsibility on his shoulders, and also realized that I could not ignore it. I was determined to learn, to help the shaman and the villagers to preserve life in the gloomy atmosphere, full of lurking ghosts. As time passed, each day was a new battle. Ghosts appeared more and more, stronger, more diverse in shape and ability. Some had monstrous shapes, wings, glowing red eyes, and bodies as transparent as mist. The strange sounds, the chilling laughter made me always live in a state of high alert. The shaman constantly researched and searched for new ways to deal with them, but he also admitted that it was not always easy to win. There were ghosts so strong that even he had to retreat. Then one day, a rumor spread throughout the village that there was an ancient ghost called the Dark Soul, the darkest demonic entity, appearing at the darkest time, able to control all other ghosts and bring destruction to the entire village. Shaman Likan looked at me, his eyes shining with determination. If the Dark Soul really appears, then this will be the final battle. I need your help. You have seen enough. Now is the time to stand up against the darkness. I nodded, although my heart was filled with fear, but also boiling with determination, because I knew that only unity, only courage and faith could dispel the darkness that was covering this beloved village. The following days, the atmosphere in the village was heavier than ever. Everyone felt the presence of darkness getting closer, like a black storm rumbling about to strike. Every night was a constant battle between the living and the ghosts lurking in the fog. The shaman Lai Kan focused all his energy on preparing for the final battle with the soul of night. He taught me and some young people in the village the most ancient rituals, secret magic, and how to protect ourselves when facing evil forces. I studied hard, focusing on each incantation, each movement of drawing the talisman in the most meticulous way. That night came so quickly, the wind whistled through every crack in the door. The sound of insects seemed to stop. Only the sound of my heart beating in my chest resounded like a war drum. We gathered at the top of the mountain, where there was a sacred circle carved by the shaman with ash and charcoal, and magic charms were hung everywhere. Mr. Lai Kan stood in the middle of the circle, holding an ancient drum, eyes closed, chanting in a deep and authoritative voice. I stood beside him, holding the sacred charm he gave me, feeling the warm energy flowing through each of my fingers. Suddenly, thick darkness covered everything, a cold air like ice spread around us. From within the darkness, the soul of night appeared with a giant figure, eyes glowing red, body like made of thick darkness and gloomy fog. The echoing laughter was full of ghosts, making everyone shiver. "Do you think you can fight me? You are just a small shaman in the middle of the forest, unable to resist the eternal darkness." The voice rang out like thunder, causing the space to explode. The shaman was not afraid at all. He beat the drum hard. The sound of the drum echoed like a challenge. The rays of light from the spells began to glow, forming a shield around our group. The battle began. The soul of darkness released cold and sharp shadows like daggers towards us. The shaman chanted faster, using the drum to beat the rhythm, creating bright white energy waves to dispel the darkness. I chanted the spells with everyone, drawing sacred symbols in the air with my hands, forming a strong protective barrier. But the power of the soul of darkness was too great. The darkness around us gradually thickened. The rays of light from us were extinguished. At that moment, I felt a strange power rising from within me. Perhaps due to the deep connection with the shaman, with the ancient rituals, I was able to chant the spells more strongly, contributing to increasing the power of the group. The battle lasted until dawn, and the light gradually prevailed. Finally, under the power of faith and unity, the night spirit let out a painful scream and disappeared into the mist. The village returned to peace, but everyone knew that the darkness would never completely disappear. But with the courage of the shaman and the determination of everyone, we kept the light for this beloved land.